Yeah, we had a good session last time and wonderful input from the group. So looking forward to that continuing. We're going to have an exercise for you to do fairly early on in the session. So that'll be a good opportunity also to fill up the coffee for a Friday and get yourself going. So let me share some slides here. Share that and that going. Beautifully done. Let's swap those. All right. So Max, assume you can see all of that fine.
Yep, that's come up.
Excellent. I've got my pen ready to go. Love using the pen. Okay, so module 2 now. We're going to get a bit more stuck into some of the road environment related aspects of the safe system. Remember last time we were fairly broad, covering the philosophy of the safe system, sort of safety culture as well, and New Zealand's road safety strategy. So we'll delve a little more and hone it in and start out the process of analysing infrastructure for its safe system alignment. So the end of this module, we really want to scratch a bit deeper onto this kinetic energy thresholds for different crash types at intersections and then at mid-block locations. So mid-block, for those who don't use that term, it's just the area between intersections is what is referred to as a mid-block. And we're going to delve into characteristics of those areas that align highly with safe system principles. And I suppose by default there, we're going to look at what doesn't align highly with safe system principles. And don't forget to count your wallies. All right. We often get a lot of questions about, how does a safe system assessment fit within the context of all these other independent assessments in transport projects like road safety audits and design reviews, DDA assessments and the like. So I thought I'd just do a little diagram to sort of cover that. I think a lot of you have probably heard of a road safety audit. Maybe some of you are road safety auditors and you do road safety audits or you commission those for your work. But road safety audits have been around quite a while, and they are an independent assessment of a transport project with a focus on safety. Now, there's a thing called a design review, and it's really where an independent set of eyes will look at an infrastructure project from a design perspective and independently look at redoing, calculations that have been done, checking things conform with standards, reviewing how well that's all going to fit together. So there is a bit of overlap between a road safety audit and that design review, which is sort of part of the quality management process and system of any design house or any designers. They should have this independent design review as part of their work. So you get a bit of overlap there. There's things that sit out in a road safety audit outside that are looking beyond the standards and guidelines and what else is going on, what are other safety issues that may arise. A safe system assessment sort of covers a bit of design review, quite a bit of road safety audit stuff that's covered, but has a whole lot of other things going on that are included. And it also is certainly presented in a very different way and used in a slightly different way. Then there's a thing called safety in design, or it's termed different things in different areas, but it's really that look at can this thing be built safely? Can it be maintained safely? Can it be decommissioned safely? So it's really about the occupational health and safety aspects of whatever's being built. And then finally, there's the DDA compliance, or the Disability Discrimination Act, or that review of can this facility be used by everybody in our community, whatever ability they have. So even, vision impaired, people in wheelchairs, can they use whatever this future facility is? So you can see there's a bit of overlap in all of these. There's lots of independent assessments and reviews going on. And, obviously for a major project, we're going to be seeing all of these. for very minor projects, you may see one of these or the like, but safe system assessments are slightly different. Now, in our 5th module, our final, 6th module, the last module anyway, we'll delve into a little bit more detail about some of the specific differences and when you would do an audit and when you would do a safe system assessment and how they all fit together. But as per usual, if you've got questions, pop them into the chat at any point. If it's about this or if it's about anything, Max will be on the keyboard behind the scenes answering, talking to you, and he'll also feed them to me. And if you really want to have a chat about it, you just hit the hand up button, and then Max will find you and be able to unmute you, and you can talk live to us. No ability for your camera to go on, so we won't be able to see you. Okay, I want to talk about intersections. Now, intersections, they have a spike in risk at intersections across our network. So the risk of death and serious injury goes up significantly at an intersection, and I'm sure you all intuitively knew that. But the thing is that it's not just the vehicle-to-vehicle crash risk that goes up at intersections. We also see a spike in run-off road risk. Pedestrian, motorcycle, cycles, everything goes up. And the reason for that is obvious with the conflict points and the interaction, the turbulence going on. The one with run-off road is an interesting one, but because it comes from 2 parts. One is people avoiding other vehicles. So somebody turns in front of them, they leave the road, and there's a run-off road incident. And interestingly, we tend to put a lot of poles, so light poles, power poles, signal pedestals, all these different poles tend to congregate around intersections. You probably knew that, but you hadn't maybe looked at it in that lens. But next time you're out walking or driving, just look at how many poles occur around your intersections compared to the mid-block sections. So as people avoid or they clip another vehicle or there's a secondary crash impact, we've got a lot of fixed point source hazards. And we saw earlier, point source hazards are really, really dangerous. And I'll show you a little bit more about that shortly. So intersections are obviously very dangerous places to be. And Monash University Accident Research Centre provided this very sort of generic high-level principles of intersection design, which are sort of based on safe system thinking. And it's interesting to see this, where they start with fewer vehicles and fewer intersections. Now, that might be practically hard to do within your particular role, but maybe it's not. But we're thinking there slightly outside of what you typically think in road design. It's more a planning style thinking. But these in our exposure, likelihood, and severity, remember we finished last session talking about exposure, likelihood, and severity as our way to find the risk or the safe system alignment. These are trying to attack that idea of exposure to crashes. So if you can put less vehicles through an intersection, there is less exposure to crashes. And if you can remove some of those intersections, there is no exposure there to intersection crashes because there's no intersection anymore. Now, yes, people might have to go to another intersection, but we can maybe look to have some significant upgrade works to that. But New Zealand tends to have quite a philosophy of open access. In fact, Australia and New Zealand both have this obsession to have a lot of free access onto the major arterial network from a lot of side roads and the like, which I think we overdo that. And something though that can get us some pretty good safe system alignment if we start removing that. Can be very hard from a community perspective, but anyway, it's in there. Then we go into fewer conflict points. Okay, now fewer conflict points, for those who don't I mean, the term sort of explains itself, but it's a point where a crash can happen when you draw the paths of all the different vehicles. Each time they cross is a conflict point. Oh, that would be a conflict point diagram that you'd be doing there. But this, in a safe system assessment perspective, we think of as likelihood. Now, people will be tempted to say less conflict points, less exposure. Now, that has been done in the past in road safety studies and investigations, but in a safe system assessment, it's very clear. As you lessen conflict points, we reduce the likelihood of crashes, but the only way to reduce the exposure of crashes is change the number of vehicles or pedestrians or cyclists or motorcyclists. Now, removing some conflict points may change the exposure as well, as in if you close off a right turn in or something like that, it lessens the number of vehicles, turning in there. So you'll get an alteration exposure, but it's not because of the reduction in conflict points, it's because of the reduction in number of vehicles. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, don't worry too much, because we'll cover it in a couple of exercises and slides. Then we start to see number 4 here, severity factors. And this is back to our biomechanics of injury, human tolerance to physical force. And we're seeing there that sort of 90-degree crash. We're looking at that 50 kilometers per hour. And this is for passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle. If you can get more angle on it, you can maybe go somewhere above 50, but certainly below 70. And the reason for that is sort of your vectors, your basic sort of physics. If you crash like that, you're going to bounce off a bit. You're going to push the energy into the environment rather than into the other vehicle. So that's good. And if you crash a bit more head on, you're actually engaging the wonderful safety features of a vehicle for a head-on or frontal crash, which are airbags, crumple zones, seat belts. They're all for a frontal crash. And we know that can be done at a higher speed. So I didn't generally talk about it, you can get it up to about 60, maybe a little bit more than 60 on the angle crash like that. Around the head-on, really, it gets to about 60, and then we get to 70 when it's sort of that fairly direct head-on crash. When we've got then unprotected road users, pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, we're talking about speeds down around the 30 kilometers per hour mark or below. I'm not saying necessarily speed limits, although that's a very helpful thing, but just trying to get our operating speeds down there at those conflict points. And if we're not able to meet these angle and speed combinations, we need to try to reduce risk to negligible levels. But let's play this out in a little bit of an exercise in a few minutes. But you can see how people are very consciously thinking now about energy management, speed, vehicle type, angles. And you get lots more detail. You're starting to get detail now around this is passenger vehicles. I should draw a little car on this slide, shouldn't I? Just to say these are all the passenger vehicle ones. Here we've got that 60 that I was talking about, and some angles on that crash from XChemX. XChemX is just it's the kinetic energy management model. It's essentially a computer program that you plug in variables and it spits out the energy and relates it to a tolerable energy. In a safe system assessment, you do not need to go to that detail to get a XChemX assessment of energy. I mean, using these broad brush speeds and angles is plenty for us doing what we're doing, and you just gauging an idea of that. So maybe take an intersection like this, new intersection being planned, and you're there having a look at it. You don't need to sort of be as precise as these angles. You can sort of just go, oh, vehicle coming out here, struck by a vehicle going there, that's about 90 degrees. So that's about the 50 kilometre per hour tolerable sort of level. Things are going to go really bad after 50 when the crashes happen. Below 50, pretty good chances of survival. Then you go, oh, the other side of the road, oh, okay, it's probably, that one's a bit more. So maybe that one we can go 60 because the angle's a bit better. It'll be a bit more of a glancing blow, the like. So you can see we're definitely not being super precise on that in a safe system assessment, but it's just getting you that general indication of how bad crashes will be. Now, in that one, we obviously haven't taken into account pedestrians or cyclists or motorcyclists. So you do that sort of thinking across all the road users. I briefly mentioned sort of secondary crashes, and this is an important thing to remember, that we're going to have an initial strike at an intersection if there's a crash there, and I'm talking passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle here. But then that entity, it's got a lot of speed, it's got a lot of energy, it's going to go somewhere, isn't it? And the Centre for Automotive Safety Research had a look at this and took 500 crashes or something at intersections like that and reorientated the direction and put the vehicles on this axis and, replotted the intersection. And they found the secondary crashes that were causing death and serious injury, were occurring in that zone mainly. Did they need to do a big study to tell us this? Probably not. I mean, I think could have given you 10 seconds and you would have been able to do the same thing. Some interesting sort of ones popping out there. I mean, those probably are the clip, where vehicles clip off somehow and fling around one way or another. But just to remember that secondary crash potential. So when you're doing a safe system assessment, you'll be looking back at these sorts of tables, that wonderful sort of color spectrum chart we put up last session with numbers on it and different crash types. So you can see the new focus, really enhanced focus on speeds, crash types, tolerance of the human body. And in fact, in my career, it's been a really interesting shift. So back when I started in road safety and road safety auditing, I would really be out there looking at the road network, and even as I'm driving or walking or riding around, I'm always looking and seeing. Back then, I'm always seeing the things that influence the chance of crash, see-through effects, sight distance, things blocking sight distance, signs being blocked by trees and that sort of stuff, right? And thinking, oh, that's going to cause a crash, or that's going to cause a crash. And I still do that. But what I do now is far more, is that I'm just analysing potential energy on the road network, right? And so I'm thinking speeds, angles, weight of vehicle, vulnerability of road user, thinking that way. Yeah, it's really interesting. I really sort of see these and things like speeds and roadside hazards and that mix of when the crash happens, not so much what is causing the crash. But we need to address both. Some people I've heard say, oh, the safe system now doesn't care about trying to stop crashes. It's all about managing energy. Like, no, we do everything we can to stop crashes happening. The reality is we know they still will. And it really frustrates me when I see people on the approach to we're doing an audit, say, of the approach to an intersection, which has got a 100 kilometre per hour road and another 100 kilometre per hour road. And there's a confusing sign, right? And they'll say, we'll fix the confusing sign and that'll fix the intersection issue. I'm like, no, we will definitely fix the confusing sign. That'll lessen the chance of an issue, of a crash happening. But oh my gosh, we have got so much potential energy at that intersection that somebody is still going to stuff this up for one reason or another, because they're intoxicated or because they're still confused, or because the kid's screaming in the back or whatever it is, we need to start addressing the energy at that intersection. Which leads me nicely into our little intersection design exercise. So Max, can I start that, or do I have to deal with any things that have popped up?
No, let's hop into it then.
Okay, here we go. We've got an intersection. Could be anywhere, could be the outskirts of Hamilton or Auckland or Christchurch or Napier, anywhere. We've got duplicated major state highway coming into the major township, and it's got a speed limit of 70 kilometres per hour, and it carries 21,000 vehicles a day. And it's got about 9% heavy vehicles. 9% heavy vehicles. The bus route, you can see there's a bus stop here. This side road's got a 50 kilometre per hour speed limit. It's got 2,000 vehicles per day coming out of there. This is like a shared path. There's a school about 400 metres down the side road. This is residential or residential area. These are two-way service roads here. What else can I tell you? Oh, this is like a drainage structure, big culvert thing. This is, well, there's a little Z crossing here, a little Danish offset crossing. Although I'd say that's a incorrect Danish offset crossing. You should Z it the other way. You make people walk at oncoming traffic always, rather than away from it. But that is a very minor little point. But if anybody is putting in a Danish offset crossing, make sure you Z it that way, get people to walk at traffic and then cross, and that'll. But anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. Okay, so that's the intersection. I'll show you a little bit of it from the street. So there you can see that bus stops there. You can see the side road coming out. Your lane, it's got some lighting, some trees, some poles, 70 kilometres per hour. It's got a bit of shoulder cycling area. Not a lot of cyclists using this. There it is again. So here is your little exercise, and we are going to give you a good sort of, what do you reckon, Max? 6-7 minutes or something to have a bit of a think about this and have a stretch as well if they want. But what you're going to be asked to do, and it's been nicely put here in a little text box so you can have that and refer to it on your screen. Remove fatal and serious injury crashes at this location. So going forward, we don't want any death or serious injury at this intersection around this area. And to do that, you're going to get a budget of $3 million. You cannot close the intersection. We've done the community consultation, and it's become very clear we are not able to close this intersection. I know you wanted to, because you went, oh, Monash University Accident Research Centre, their principal said less intersections. We're going to close this. No, I like your thinking, but you can't do it. And you're operating in the current political, organisational, community framework that you currently operate in. So if you are, proposing something radical, you're going to have to think about how are you going to convince your boss and your boss's boss and the local member and the community to get on board this idea. Now, you're going to recommend some treatments. You're going to type them into the chat, but it doesn't stop there, because we want you to start a bit of safe system assessment thinking in terms of categorization of what you're asking into exposure, likelihood, and or severity. So maybe you say, oh, I want to do a flyover at this intersection. Now you might go, I don't know, like I fly over grade separation, whatever you want to call it. Now you might go, I don't know how much that's going to cost. Like, I don't know how much infrastructure costs or other, things, community consultation, or these sorts of, I don't know how much this costs. Well, you have the instant cost estimator tool available to you, and I am that tool. So you just type it in there and I will simply tell you a cost immediately. So you can just write grade separation cost, ? And I'll come back immediately and say $42 million. And obviously that's going to be out of your budget. But you could write anything in there and we'll give you an instant cost, or just have a crack at it yourself. It's not an exercise about getting precise costing on infrastructure. It's an exercise about thinking really through how do we address exposure or likelihood or severity or combination of all. Now, you're free to do anything you want within that bounds. And yeah, I'll take any questions at this stage about the exercise. As I say, we're going to give you 6 minutes to do it.
I was just going to check with you here, Ken, if there was any crash history we should be aware of, if you've noted any trends here and if that's relevant.
That's a really good question, Max. So another big change in my career, so I'm going to go slightly on a tangent here again. Big change in my career as well has been from absolute obsession with crash history in the first big part of my career. Looking for black spots or areas of crash clusters, doing crash investigations. How many crashes was always, what are the crashes? What are the crash types? Tell me. Moved a bit away from that now, and I don't particularly I look at the crash history, but I take that as one part of what I'm doing. And the reason for that is that crash history is a presentation of crash risk. But it's not the only, you may have intersections that have no crashes, but still have a significant risk. It's just it hasn't presented itself in death and serious injury yet. And likewise, it's less often. If you have actual cluster of crashes, then you've probably got a risk there that you need to address. But we often see people with one crash or something, and then they're obsessed by choosing that, where there might be an area that's far higher risk. It just hasn't had that. Because we are dealing with a very, there's a huge amount of inherent randomness in what we're doing, but there's also then that infrastructure risk perspective. That being said, this intersection does have a crash history and it's significant. And going forward, we're still going to be looking for areas of clusters of crashes and trying to address that. It's just that we shouldn't be ignoring areas without crashes yet. And as Colin Brodie, who many of you will probably know, when he sums it up beautifully, especially on routes, and he says, we're chasing the lightning strikes. Now, yes, there's areas along there where maybe there are towers, so there's more chance that lightning's going to hit there, but there is this sort of along the route. But anyway, this one has crash history, and it's 6 serious injury crashes over a 5-year period, so that's a pretty high amount, and they are right turn against and right through vehicle coming out there, and they're all passenger vehicle. 6 crashes. That's it. It's all happening in there.
Thank you, Ken. We've got some queries for the cost estimating tool, if you care to indulge. How much would a roundabout cost at this location?
Yeah, so to build a roundabout to meet Austrade's Guide to Road Design Part 4B requirements for the vehicles that are going through here will cost $7 million.
Okay, so that one's out of budget. What about some traffic signals? Let's signalise this intersection.
So this, signalisation is 1.5 million. It's quite well set up to signalise for the having that median and a few other bits and pieces. Yep. So 1.5 million.
Good, good. And raised crossing platform. Cost for that one.
Raised crossing platform across the arterial road, the main road, to raise a section of that for a crossing point. Just the raising itself will be 300,000. And if you wanted to then signalise on top of that, it's another 800,000.
Very good. Channelization or a seagull kind of arrangement, what would the cost for that one be?
Yeah, we're going to go. So that one's going to be 750,000 due to the fact that you've got a bit of to seagull. This is going to be a challenge. Oh, well, maybe people don't know what a seagull is. A seagull is basically to create some sort of idea in there that you could accelerate vehicles so they could come out and accelerate down and merge in from the right. Yeah, you're going to need to do some widening and get some extra things happening. But that's just the physical civil works to get your seagull in. And then if you wanted to signalise that or anything like that, you're talking another sort of 1.5 on top of that. But you can still, just scrape that in your budget.
One more, and then we might let everyone have a think about this, jot some own answers in there. But a pedestrian or a cyclist underpass or a bridge to fly over that intersection.
Okay, overpass, 3.1 million. Oh no, I'll give you a good deal because I like you, Max.
Good, good. I'm listening.
2.9.
Oh, okay, just within budget. What about if we went under?
If you went under, we're going to use that existing. You're going to use that existing drainage facility. Yeah, okay. If you're going to use the existing drainage facility, you can go for 2 million.
Okay.
Because you've got to dig it out a bit more, and you've got to re-strengthen it and cut a little hole for air in and do some barriers and a few other things. But it's fairly well set up. If you're going to create a whole new one, it's going to be right on your 3 million.
Fantastic. Shall we give everyone a bit of time now just to contemplate all those different options?
Yeah, and they can also have a stretch, fill up their water. But let's come back. But if you need any cost estimation, pop it into the chat as you're going. But remember, when you put your answers in, and you're just going to type your answers into the chat, exposure or likelihood or severity. You can just put an E, an S, or an L. Seeing some good good ideas coming in here. Nice. I tell you what, Max, very impressed. Everybody's following those instructions to put exposure, likelihood, and severity, and doing a good job of it.
That's right. Lots of varied treatments coming through as well.
Yeah. We'll give it another minute, just because I know a few people are finalising their thinking. All right, Max, I think we better keep ticking along.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to have a look through, make a couple of comments on a few of these awesome ideas, and then maybe with a few slides delve into a bit of detail on them. But let's have a look at what people are saying there. Make the surface roads one way, likelihood. So that is, yes, likelihood. And then we see quite a number of these ideas involving signalisation of the intersection, and people are rightly putting their likelihood. That's right, signalising would impact the likelihood. We see there some people also trying to reduce the speed in one way or another. So we see speed limit changes down to 60. We see some raised safety platforms being put forward on all approaches to address the severity. And the speed limit reduction will impact on both the likelihood and severity. So well done. I see a number of people putting both likelihood and severity for, reducing the speed limit and looking at severity reductions there on a number of things to get speeds down. So that's good. Removing some of the trees and hazards. Now, that's an interesting one. Some people are putting there that is removal of the exposure, and some are saying it's the removal of or reducing the likelihood. And I would tend to likelihood. If you were to remove a tree or a pole or the like, you may feel that I've removed the exposure to that crash. And you're right for that particular tree or post, all right? But what we're actually thinking about in the safe system assessment is the crash type in its entirety. So a runoff road crash. Have you removed the potential for death and serious injury within runoff road crashes? Well, no, unless you've removed, well, I was going to say all of the poles and then all of whatever background hazards there are there, and have this, flood area. But even then, you've got a rollover crash potential in the runoff road, which you're getting close there to removal. But really, if you take out a few key trees or poles, we would, under a safe system assessment, refer to that as a reduction in the likelihood of runoff road crash. Lots of support there for signalisation. Okay, some barriers to protect road users from the culverts. Those culverts there look quite nice, quite nasty, don't they? So yeah, that's an interesting idea. Now, would that influence the exposure, the likelihood, or the severity? Well, interestingly, that one would influence the severity of crashes. Okay. Now, again, you're probably thinking, oh no, it could be exposure because you can't be exposed to crashing into that hazard. But the thing is, bring it back to the crash type. You are still exposed to a run-off-road crash, just this time you're going to hit a barrier instead of going into a culvert or into it. So you can hit the barrier, run along it, dissipate energy over time, lower severity crash. So it's a severity reduction technique. I'm just skimming through here. I won't get to everybody's. I'm just seeing things that are remarkably different now. Okay, so we've got some looking at providing cycling facilities, maybe dedicated cycling facilities. Some people are there thinking about using the service road for dedicated cycling facilities. And we've got a bit of a mix of people talking about cycling facilities in exposure or likelihood. Now, I tend to, for something like this, if we were to create a bike facility, separated bike facility, maybe take one of the service road lanes and run it through there, I'd probably still say that this is likelihood because they're going to have to cross the road somewhere, so exposed to crashes there. Depending on how this was separated, there is a very, very low chance, but vehicles can still crash in there. But probably going to be likely. It's getting close to exposure alterations, but I'm just worried about how do we deal with that intersection there. Left in, left out. That will influence the likelihood of crashes. Maybe the severity as well. The only way it would influence the exposure is if it changes the number of vehicles going through this intersection, and it may do that. Of course, you're going to need to think about how are these people coming out of here going to be able to go that way. Are they going to U-turn? Where is that all going to happen? Obviously, you don't know enough about this network and the area to make any informed call on that. Underground the power there, and well done there on likelihood, because yes, if we underground the power and we put all the power poles underground, yes, you have stopped people being able to hit the power pole, but they can still hit the light poles, they can still run off-road, hit the houses, drop into the culvert. There's lots of run-off-road potential still. It's just less likely that they're going to have a run-off-road crash, because if they leave the road, they may be able to get back on, recover, no crash. So that's really that's awesome. That's probably all I want to cover now. I'm going to touch on a few of the other things that popped up with some slides. But Max, I'll ask you to just monitor the chat there for now. I'm getting rid of the chat from my screen because I want to jump through a few slides. Okay. A lot of people looked at that intersection and said, yeah, signals are the go. And there was actually quite a bit of, there's a bit of thinking to be done there. But signals, as I mentioned, they influence the likelihood. You'll see me use this little box to show you exposure or likelihood or severity quite a lot, just to keep reinforcing that. Now, signals do a wonderful job in reducing the likelihood. They, rule of thumb, somewhere around the 40–45% reduction in the chance of a crash if you signalise an intersection. It does leave quite a big residual there, doesn't it? And in fact, there's this really interesting little study you can do in around any major population, so any major city, and look at the outer roads of that city and plot the deaths and serious injuries in the last 10 years. And when you see these hotspots pop up, if you use lots of GIS software does hotspots these days, so these are all large signalised intersections. Isn't that interesting? They've been signalised, but they are where there are deaths and serious injuries occurring in these outer metropolitan areas where the speeds are high. Now, of course, the exposure is very high, isn't it? Because you're getting large volumes of vehicles and they're large volumes of vehicles on the other road. But there is this sort of perception that, hey, well, it's signals. They're the ultimate treatment, aren't they? Until you can afford to grade separate. But interestingly, Professor Jeremy Woolley out of CASA, Centre for Automotive Safety Research, doing a major inquiry into road trauma, that one was in Australia, he came out with a statement. He said, traffic signals are the biggest failure of traffic engineers, which is a provocative statement. And I think he was intentionally doing that. The reason he said it was that organisationally, often you get to that point where the traffic signals are the end, and then you've done fully controlled right turns. That's a red arrow. You've done red light cameras, LEDs with masked arms. And it's like, yeah, people, they've got to now comply with the rules. We can't do anything more here. But we do have this interesting thing where we just keep building them and hoping for some different result. Let me come back to that. Actually, it's got me thinking of something that I want to show you. But I want to tell you about roundabouts as a different one. Roundabouts addressing the severity of crashes. Now, you do get some likelihood reduction on some crash types, and you get some increases in the likelihood of some other crash types, but we just generally give it to severity of crash. And I'll show you reasons for that, but it's because of angles, speeds, conflict points. But they do need to be big beasts, usually. And I said Australia's Part 4B, Guide to Road Design Part 4B, and you'll look at that, and it's basically what's your large vehicle and how much room does it need to sweep around or even do a U-turn? And it's a big amount of space that it needs. And we do see often as well, we see people wanting to do reverse curves into roundabouts, and certainly in New Zealand we do those reverse curves into roundabouts. So you're taking up farmland, they're chicaning people into these at speed. We're creating a huge area, and this is obviously not the same site, and you can see there's a large amount of area. And we would have at the site you were looking at had to purchase and knock down lots of properties and create that land space and move services and all sorts of things. There's also this challenge with roundabouts associated with traffic capacity and flow. So as your traffic capacity builds up, you can't get as many vehicles through a roundabout like this. And especially they don't perform so well when there's unbalanced flow. And so some of you are probably very attuned to that. When 2,000 on that one, 21,000 major road. Roundabout's not it's not a great option from that perspective. Now, I don't dismiss roundabouts that quickly. Obviously, it was a little exercise, so you were probably thinking fast. I sometimes think, we could do a set of signals here, and we could also make that a nice pedestrian crossing area. So, and maybe bikes can come up here and do some sort of crossing. I might have to get them to go down there so we don't have to take more land, but anyway, that's all right. And we'll also put some sensors in the road back here. And when vehicles queue all the way back to here, that can trigger these signals to go red here. And that way we can flush out some of these vehicles. And so it's what we'd call just metering a roundabout is what we call it. So, there's some ideas, on how you can deal with unbalanced flows. But that big roundabout is interesting. What about, could we go small roundabouts? Now, this is what we call a mini roundabout, and this is certainly not at the same location as well. In fact, this is over in the UK. Mini roundabouts. So here we've got just a little bit of paint, and it's very small, and certainly a large vehicle would just be able to track straight over that, no worries. So there's an advantage there. But we don't really have that physical island. We don't have that deflection on the approaches and the like. So why would this give us a safety benefit, and it actually does give us a pretty significant safety benefit in these areas. And one of the big reasons is that nobody approaching this believes that they have ultimate priority. So if we're approaching, every vehicle approaching here is going to think they may have to give way. And so they slow down and they look around and they come back to reality a bit if they're thinking about something else, you know, pondering what they're going to have for dinner, thinking about the fight they had with their partner, whatever it is. They sort of come back to reality a bit to look around. This one is sort of the UK equivalent of a four-way stop, or four-way stop that they use in the US. And I know there's a few of those around New Zealand, four-way stops. Not too many, but I like the idea, because disruption of the ultimate priority is a good thing. And if you're worried a little bit about the speeds people might be approaching, you can do raised platforms and things like that. But roundabouts have a whole lot of other benefits. I mean, there's less conflict points. I talked about a conflict point diagram. Here's one. I know this is passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle. You see very few conflict points at the roundabout. You see lots of ways that crashes can happen at the signal lines intersection or the give way control intersection. You know, lots of ways crashes can happen. Haven't included there pedestrian cyclists, and we'll cover that in the next module in a lot more detail. And you know, those road users at roundabouts and things like that. And it's an interesting topic, that one, because there are challenges with cyclists and pedestrians at roundabouts. But we do have some pretty exciting techniques on how to address that. The angle of crash is really friendly at a roundabout and really unfriendly for some of the crashes that happen at signalised intersections. We have a very square right angle crash at intersections with that, but you see this nice sort of bounce off style crash at roundabouts. So there's a wonderful one. And this one, sort of, I alluded to it, but it's people are driving along in all states of consciousness, and she would love them all to be alert and compliant, but they are, you know, maybe they've worked the double shift, maybe they've, you know, had a weekend partying and they've been, and now they're driving 2 hours home and hardly got any sleep. And maybe they're a little bit intoxicated, drug affected, whatever it is. We are trying to, in all sorts of ways, you know, reduce that happening. But the reality is there is quite a bit of that going on. And if you disrupt the physical form of the road through vertical or horizontal deflection, and that's sort of a physical thing that they have to go around to navigate, or something that they might have to go over or the like, it brings them back from wherever they are for at least a moment to be present, looking at the road environment, navigating it, and then through they go. Unfortunately, if we just put traffic signals, a green light and a red light, the form of the road doesn't really change. There is a portion of them that just don't react. Sometimes it's an intentional put the foot down, run a red, but yeah, it's just very interesting. So we're seeing that roundabouts, at least for passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle crashes, which is still the bulk of our death and serious injury at intersections. I mean, vulnerable road users are climbing up significantly. But yeah, I mean, roundabouts are far superior, somewhere in the 80% crash reduction compared to that 45% for traffic signal. And it did remind me, Max, of something that I was dealing with. I'm going to just jump into my folders and see if I can find a little document that I want to show the group. And I did show it to another group a New Zealand group, and they commented that they liked it. So I'm going to repeat that and find it again. So Max, I don't know if there's any questions for me to answer while we're doing that.
I think you're okay to, just continue chatting through.
Can I find this? Okay, yep, got it. Right. So let me give the background before I display this. So I was working in the road safety department in VicRoads, the Victorian Road Controlling Authority, and there was this massive congestion easing program going on. It was called Keep Melbourne Moving, and big investment in things to reduce congestion, peak hour congestion. And the majority of the projects in this massive program were to take roundabouts out and put traffic signals in, because you're going to be able to manage traffic better, move, you can get more capacity, throughput. And anyway, so those project designs were coming in for a road safety review, and a big pile of them onto my desk, and my colleague goes next to me's desk, and we were working through them. And they were expecting us to comment on the signal phasing, the sight lines to signals, where the crossing points were, line marking, all of that sort of good stuff, which we did, obviously. But we also then started to put these memos on the front of our review and send them back. So hopefully you can see that, Max.
Yep, that's come up.
So I took a copy of it when I left, just because I thought, oh, maybe we'll use that in the future. So from the road safety department, okay, road safety. The road safety department has analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows. Project life, 20 years. Number of deaths attributed to this project, 2.3. And put little pictures of people just to remind them we're going to kill people. It's not just a number. Number of serious injuries, 12.6. Statement of acceptance. The above road trauma is accepted by, and tried to get the regional manager or regional director to sign that off.
Did you get many signatures there, Ken?
Got no signatures. Never got one back signed. Did get asked to go with my colleague into the executive director's office for a talking to about the responsibilities of a road controlling authority in managing all sorts of challenges and congestion and balancing and the like. Okay, well, we signed up to the safe system, and we don't compromise death and serious injury, and we know this is going to kill seriously injured people, so somebody should just stand up and take that on. And of course, there was a slight sort of intentionally putting something out there to show this in a very in-your-face way, but I think sometimes you've got to do that, don't you? Yeah. Anyway, I thought you might find that interesting, the decisions that are made. But I think if we'd had back in this day a safe system assessment to us available, it essentially does the same thing, probably in a slightly less confrontational way, if I say that. Not sharing any screen at the moment. I'm just talking. I'll share my screen again. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. And as I say, I think safe system assessments, if they were available at the time, would have been a wonderful way to do that and not ruffle so many feathers. Anyway, back to roundabouts. But not all roundabouts perform as well as they do. Pretty much 2-lane roundabout, even 3-lane roundabouts, they all operate better than set traffic signals pretty much in these higher speed environments, right? But in low speed environments, signals are a wonderfully aligned safe system tool to manage flow, because they do a good job of managing and providing pedestrian facilities. And if you've got your area slow, they're just a wonderful likelihood reducing technique as well. But here's what have we got? Speed of vehicle on the y-axis there, and we've got inner radius of the roundabout. This is more just a bit of probably interest for some people rather than anything else. Sorry, bear with me. Get my pen back. There it is. Yeah, so speed is generally a pretty good proxy for what you're going to get in terms of death and serious injury in most road safety circumstances. It's not in all, but you've got speed there, you've got inner radius, and then we've got double lane roundabouts. So there's incredibly high speeds, and it comes down as you get your radius bigger. Single lane roundabouts and turbo roundabouts. And turbo roundabouts are an interesting one. For those who don't know what a turbo is, this is a lead in to talk about a particular safe system element. Here's a turbo roundabout. You've got a raised separator on the approach. You've got a raised separator in the middle and on your outer. So if you want to turn right, you go into the right lane, you get into the intersection there, and you go around there. Here's another turbo intersection, turbo roundabout, raised separator, raised separator. They make your performance of a 2-lane roundabout back to a 1-lane roundabout. They're really good. I love this aerial image. Look at this. Look at the angle of this going on. But the trucks come out, probably shouldn't have. And we've got another vehicle. And I can look at that, and I'm sure you can look at that and go, oh, well, it's going to be slow, isn't it? We know they're going to be going slow. They have to be going slow, don't they, to navigate around that? And if they're going to hit, it's not going to be a serious incident, is it? I mean, there's straight away just shows the benefits of a roundabout. But yeah, that's a turbo roundabout, just for your interest. But this one struck me as really quite interesting. This is in the Netherlands. It's a big turbo roundabout, obviously, signalised turbo even. So they put the traffic signals on the approach to the turbo. Look at the land take on this. Huge amount of land. These are two sort of major arterials come together, and we had a Dutch engineer over who we were talking to them about cyclists roundabouts, but I showed them this and I said, "Oh, this is fascinating," and I said, in Australia or New Zealand, we would probably have that as, if the traffic volume had got to this and the saturation, it would either be big signalised intersection, or it would be a grade separation flyover if we could afford it, but probably a big signalised intersection. And the Dutch engineer said, yes, okay, that could work with, and assume you'd have raised platforms to keep speeds down. So probably not. In fact, no, we wouldn't. And it just boggled his mind. He's like, but what about the death and serious injury to your community? How could you can't operate that? Like, it just could not make sense of this idea that you would expose your community to energy of that magnitude. Anyway, that's interesting. I think we're getting better at it. Anyway, but what it is, this whole conversation is starting to spark discussion and thinking around how do we manage vehicles through these large intersections with high volumes, yet retain some of those safe system characteristics of reduced speed, better crashing. And we're seeing these sorts of ideas popping up, which, there's lots of exciting things that we can do in this space. But this one certainly, a vehicle approaching here is going to see something physical, so that's going to wake them up a bit. They're going to have some deflection to deal with, and we're going to get better crashing, and speeds will be reduced. So these are good wins. This is a artistic mock-up. It has not actually been built. Cut-through roundabout. There are cut-through roundabouts out there around the world, but nothing quite of this magnitude. It looks scary from here and confusing and the like, but I dare say on the ground it would be much simpler and easier to navigate. We shouldn't get too concerned. But what I'm liking is the thinking, the principles of not accepting, people should stop at the red light. And saying, some of them aren't going to, can we manage the energy? And it was really interesting to see that quite a few of you put, raised platform, or there's just another. This one's actually called the squircle. But quite a few of you put raised platforms or raise the intersection. And in the start of my career, or if I'd said, "Oh, why don't we raise that intersection or put some raised safety platforms on the state highway with 21,000 vehicles a day, 9% commercial vehicles, it's a bus route, it's the emergency vehicle route." I would have been told to sit in the corner and think about what I just said. Like, it was unheard of. You don't do vertical deflection. You don't do anything raised on your major state highway. But we've evolved from that. We're in a much sort of better place to be thinking about slowing vehicles down, and that these are not urban speed humps. These are raised platforms, and the grade you use of the ramp can be shallower. You can design it whatever speed you want. And that's what that area ended up, that's what they came up with as well. They said, well, traffic signals seem appropriate, and many of you got to that point as well. They can't afford the roundabout, also going unbalanced flow. We've got a route consistency as well that we want to sort of maintain. There's signals up the road, signals down the road, and we think that that's the appropriate signals. But they said, are we willing to accept that residual death and serious injury we know is still going to occur? And they said, no, maybe we can do more. Maybe we can do more. And they said, what about raised platforms, raised safety? And you can see they have done one on the approach here and one on the approach here. They haven't raised the whole intersection, and nor did they do a raised one on this leg. And why is that? Well, the reason is that these are the bullet vehicles. And they're the only ones that you need to slow down in this scenario, because it's a T intersection. These vehicles turning in and coming out, they are not the bullet vehicles. You do not need to slow them down. They're not going to be up at the speeds to do the damage. So that was their idea, and they save cost in doing that. You don't disrupt any, buses or trucks or anything coming out of here with the change in grade. And Max, I see you popped up there, maybe with a question, but I'll ask a question first and then you can ask. What speed, I'm going to ask this to people, and the prize for the person who puts it in first, what speed do you think they were trying to get the bullet vehicle down to when the particular crash type they were trying to get within tolerable limits was the vehicles coming in and the vehicles going out, being struck by this bullet vehicle? So what speed in kilometres per hour?
We're seeing lots of 50s so far, and I've got Anton in there, very first one. He's got lightning fingers there.
50, spot on. And that's because, remember, right angle crash, 50-ish, 50 or so. So you can see there it is built, and there's the 50 advisory. So a shallowish grade ramp there. Now, Max, did you have a question for me or no?
Yes, I did. There was a good question that came through just regarding those concepts. They do look, a little bit far out, a little bit different to what we're seeing. And Anna just pointed out that perhaps the traditional teaching of the simplicity in safety as well, and where you are creating more confusing kind of arrangements, there an increased risk in road users not understanding what's going on and perhaps entering that environment and not knowing what to do or how to react. And just thought I could pick your brains on that question.
These ones?
These ones.
Yeah. So there's the sort of I'm just trying to think how to unpack about 5 hours worth of ideas I've got floating around in my head on that one question. We want to create readable road environments so people understand them and they intuitively do that. But there is an element of benefit in requiring road users to think, and by the nature of that, slow down. So if your road environment is just too monotonous and unengaging, drivers are switched off. Now, this whole, it's so murky how it plays out with vehicle features and autonomy and the vehicle taking over different driving tasks and the like. So it's fascinating. But you know, sometimes when the traffic signals are out, we see, you know, I'm often fascinated by that. Or go to a flashing orange. You watch the vehicles go through that intersection with such caution and slow. It is just beautiful. You just go like creeping out there, checking, we're all good, slowly go through the intersection. So the energy's down and everything's like that. When it's not like that, and there's just that one incident, high speed. So yeah, I mean, maybe these are too, they're not intuitive yet, but I tell you what, if roundabouts did not exist, they were not a thing, and somebody appeared with a design that had a roundabout and said, I've got this idea, let's do this thing, I've called it a roundabout. These days, it would never get through our design committees and the like. No possible way. There would just be the risk. People would just be going off their nut with the risks that they could see of this crazy roundabout, unintuitive. You know, people will run off the road all with if you're putting, you know, horizontal deflection into a fast speed environment. People are going to run straight into the middle of it. People will go the wrong way around it. You know, so we can always see so many risks of something right like this. We have to draw ourselves and think about all the benefits that we can get of something like this as well. But you know, sort of going off on different tangents. I think the point is good and reasonable, and we need to think about the readability of a road. And any road environment, but I think we also need to disrupt the monotony and the like. But yeah, I don't think we need to go to our, you know, cut throughs like this, because a raised signalized intersection is a pretty exceptional way to reduce speed, thus reduce energy. So we've improved safe system alignment and control using something people are very familiar with, which is signals, provides facilities for vulnerable road users, and you know, manages traffic flow really well. So I don't think we need to go to those other ideas. I just like the thinking. So there you go. There's the one Surf Coast Kidman, and you can see they've gone with the 50, and that's predominantly because that was their particular crash type that they were trying to address. Now, there are vulnerable road users there. We know with a raised safety platform at about 50, it would reduce the death and serious injury for pedestrians by about 60% compared to not having that raised platform, same environment. So it's pretty amazing from that perspective. It doesn't get us quite into those tolerable ranges for pedestrians and cyclists, but for these road environments, it's pretty exceptional way to do it. I love this picture. I love this picture for a couple of reasons. I mean, we've got obviously the green lights, and we've got somebody slowing down. And I took this when the colleague, when we were out there doing a post-opening road safety audit of it, just checking everything had been installed right and wasn't causing any other issues. And I'm just like, that to me is just wonderful, because we're slowing the vehicles on the up to the conflict point, and then they'll accelerate back up in the lesser risk environment. Some people get really frustrated by this. They're like, it's so inefficient. You're slowing everybody down for this very rare chance of incident. I'm like, you know, again, if we had a roundabout there, everybody would be slowing down all the time on the approach to that. Nobody seems to jump up and down about that, do they? But it's just because we're not used to this and we haven't seen too much of it that people are annoyed. An interesting one also is the tightening of the dilemma zone. So the dilemma zone, for those who haven't heard that term, the dilemma zone is a point in time and space when a driver approaching a signalised intersection is in a dilemma. As the orange has appeared, they're in a dilemma. Do I stop or do I put the foot down and go? It's its official term, the dilemma zone. It's up there with some of my favourite naming of road infrastructure things ever. The dilemma zone is one. Trap lane is my other favourite naming one. I just want to pat the person on the back who comes up with these particular names. They just describe things so well. So the dilemma zone it's significantly reduced as soon as you put a raised platform in there, because the driver, like this one, immediately is going to decide to stop. So it really tightens that dilemma zone because they know they're going to have to navigate over a raised area. And that's going to be another win for road safety. We're loving seeing them in New Zealand. So here we have Thomas Gordonton. Gordon, is that right? Yeah, just outside Hamilton, or in Hamilton there. And that one's up and running and performing beautifully, as I'm told from my my friends at Hamilton City Council, Simon Crowther and others. We went out there and had a look at it just before COVID hit, really, actually, when in the design phase. And so we're seeing it, and it's really something that New Zealand is beautifully taking on now. Lots of design, lots of thinking, lots of discussions about what are the grades that should be used, where exactly to place it, what if it's on a slight curve, and these sorts of things. So wonderful, wonderful stuff. And we're seeing it spread across what I would say are the forward-thinking jurisdictions in road safety. New Zealand, Victoria, pretty much the ones that I think about as the leaders in pushing and getting some of this happening. And certainly Victoria is doing a lot of them, and I like this example here. This just made me happy in the sense that sort of 12 years on from when I was writing those memos in the road safety department, another congestion easing program going on in outer metropolitan Melbourne, and this was a roundabout. And the roundabout was being removed for congestion management, and a safe system was done on the proposed signalised intersection. And the safe system said it's going to decrease your alignment with safe system principles. Okay, you're going to make things worse. And here are some ideas on what could be done. You need to get the speed and the energy of passenger vehicles down. And you could consider raising the intersection, or you could consider signalising the roundabout, or you consider, other options. And so they raised the intersection. Now, I personally would like to have seen this down to 30 for the flip lane for the pedestrian crossing point. But anyway, let's celebrate the wins when we get them. That safe system assessment is in there, and we're seeing some good wins. And there's lots of guidance on this. So if you're considering raised intersections on state roads, or even major local roads, minor local roads, it's a bit more commonly done for speed humps or raised areas. But there's some Victorian guidance which you may want to turn to, but not better, but more sort of New Zealand context as well, is the recent Austroads report, effectiveness and implementation of raised safety platforms. Now, this work was done by some very smart and capable New Zealanders, so Hamish Mackey and crew, for those who know Hamish, and really good information about how we can start doing this and deploying this and start reducing those hot spots of death and serious injury. Max, let me should we give another minute now? Just again, if people want to stretch, and then I'll just talk about another little intersection thing. We do have an assignment for you at the end of this session. So Max is going to need a little bit of time to explain that. But let's just take another minute. All right, let's get back into it. Lots of great conversation going on in the background as well. And thanks to everybody who's putting it out there, popping things down and ideas. It's one thing I miss most with these online sessions is being able to have that conversation, interaction, go down different paths. So it's wonderful if you type that in. Thank you. And sharing it with everybody is also good, so others are feeling involved in that. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other little bits and pieces. I just want to briefly touch on the same principles and the same thinking of energy management, speed management, and the like through different sort of road environment. This one we're seeing a high-speed road environment, 100 kilometers per hour, sort of the main road hikes around that way. And, you know, it's got a lot of crash potential and presenting also with crashes here, high severity crashes. So the region looking at it going, okay, could we create a roundabout here? And they do their roundabout design, and it's big. It's big, and it's got, you know, big vertical deflection, big roundabout, because they need to. That's probably the footprint. The roundabout's probably there, and they're really just massive. And the cost of it's just going blowing out of the water. This is a big Telstra exchange or communication exchange that have to move, big land acquisition. You know, it's just massive. So, you know, they go back and they revert to saying, okay, well, we can't afford that. Let's do a right turn lane facility, and we'll do some warning signs. And again, you know, the safe system assessment came in and plays out and says, yeah, you're going to improve things a little bit with reducing the likelihood. There you go. And so I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do in this case, but, you know, don't think that by doing that, we're really going to achieve our high safe system alignment, you know, close to elimination of death and serious injury. We're going to reduce a little bit. No. So how can we get that? How can we get that at a lower cost? And in this one, they went, there's a sort of picture of the intersection, and that was some of the crashes that were occurring. How do we get that? And this one, they said, well, what about that smaller roundabout? And they looked at that mini roundabout we saw from that urban area in the UK, but they said, what about a compact roundabout? So something sort of in between. So very small little circulating, roundabout in the middle, and then a concrete apron around it, and straight approaches. And their worry was speed on these approaches straight. And so what about some raised platforms, shallow, and maybe raise the intersection? So this is quite unconventional from a sort of road design perspective. And anyway, they designed it up. You can see the grades there, very different to an urban speed hump or anything like that. And I'm happy to send the detailed designs if you're a designer and you want to delve into the detail of this stuff. But you can see there, shallow sort of vertical deflection, and then the next one, and then actually I can move a bit forward in this. And you can see the roundabout's actually just that little thing. This is concrete apron, so a truck can track over that. So you're catering for the larger vehicle swept path, utilising that. So pretty exciting, and about under half the cost of the full-size roundabout, and pretty much all the benefit. So that's pretty good, isn't it? Pretty exciting. Oh, I do want to do this little quiz, Max. It's just a one-question quiz, I think.
That's correct, yes. I might just launch the poll now. I've got true or false, traffic signals are not safe system. So is that true, is that false, or is that an unintelligible question? Unintelligible, meaning not.
What does unintelligible question mean?
Means it's not a very sensible question to be asking. Doesn't add up.
Yeah.
So I'll give you 30 seconds or so to go through that poll. And while we wait, Ken, Ryan just asked, how would the roundabout affect the likelihood?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we tend to just allocate roundabouts to the severity of crashes. We do see an increase in rear end crashes, and at double lane roundabouts, an increase in sideswipe crashes and these sort of things. They are very low severity incidents, but we do see quite a few of them. So they're different crash types and the severity are different, but we tend to just allocate it to severity there. Good question.
Okay, I'll give everyone 5 more seconds to complete that poll. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end the poll there and share the results and let you chat through, Ken.
Thanks, Max. So we see most people saying unintelligible question, and I like that. I mean, the first unintelligible thing about that question is to talk about safe system in that binary, in that it is safe system or it's not. I mean, we're talking to spectrum. High alignment with safe system principles, lower alignment with safe system. The second one is you don't have any context, right? I mean, it's hard to do that. But I'll also take on there the false one because of exactly that. It's not the traffic signals that are safe system aligned or not safe system aligned. It's the context and the energy and those sorts of things. But I can also take the true as correct if you were thinking in a particular circumstance in a high-speed environment and, a signalized intersection and operating speeds and throughput. So, a little bit of a tricky question, but the real reason I put it in there was to stop anybody walking out of this course and saying, "Oh, traffic signals are not, are not part of the safe system," or something like that, which is just not. That's misinterpreting the whole context of what we're doing. Thanks, Max. Okay, so let's keep going, and I've got to make sure I give Max plenty of time to talk you through the exercise and maybe even give you a little bit of time to do your quiz at the end of this session. But let's very briefly talk about lane departure. And here we go. We've got a very long state highway. It's got one lane in each direction. It goes on and on and on like this. It's got sealed shoulders. It's got center line, occasional overtaking lane. without knowing much about this road, well, let's say, I don't know, the volume's 4,000 vehicles a day, ADT. What crash types do you think are occurring on this road? What are the crash types? Just jot in a few, or jot in one if you think you have an idea. Yeah, no, this group is spot on. I mean, I'm seeing it there. Run off road and head on. Run off road and head on. And that's really the occasional intersection I'm seeing. Yep, that's right. There would be the occasional overtaking one. There'd be head-on crashes. The overwhelming majority of head-on crashes are not inappropriate overtaking manoeuvres. Those do occur. They're more just people falling asleep or being distracted and drifting out of their lane, either into the oncoming lane or drifting out of their lane to the left, overcorrecting to get back on the road and going into the other lane. And so that's right. So we know this. We know that there is just inherent death and serious injury built that, into these roads as they are. And you see so many of these out in New Zealand, right? They're doing a good job there in the Safer Roads program into trying to do some really significant works on these sorts of roads. But you see this, like all these vehicles and then all these vehicles, and this just happens all the time. And all we're doing is hoping, fingers crossed, that they don't leave their lane into the other lane. The likelihood, it's all about trying to, as that sits, we're relying fully on the likelihood of crashes. The severity of that, or leaving the road, hitting the power poles, the trees, rolling over, even, snagging on embankments like this, rolling over. They're just incredibly high risk scenarios for, at a collective community level. And we know the 29 kilometre per hour up to gone up now to 32 kilometre per hour side impact pole test. I mean, leaving the road, hitting these trees, power poles, violent energy incidents. And, the vehicles are not designed to withstand much force at all on that side impact. And in fact, here, just let me show you this. This is quite graphic. I'll say now. 60 kilometre per hour estimated impact velocity here in this, based on the video image. The violence of that event is just unbelievable. And they're predicting from the video and the whatever time sequence of it, around the 60. Yeah. So basically what I'm sort of saying here is that we are so far beyond safe system energy levels with those high-speed road environments in the way they are, that we need some serious addressing of that to get us closer to where we want. The idea of cutting down all the trees in the roadside and removing the power poles is going to do a lot of benefit. But the thing is that we don't want to cut down trees, just, and often you can't cut down trees for different reasons. And also it's worth noting that rollover crashes are something to be aware of. So I've got down here, clear zone, right? Area free of fixed hazards. And you see there, as you sort of clear it out, you get less hit, less hit object. You get more rollover crashes. This one probably explains things a little bit better. So we've got here run-off road casualty crashes per 100 million VKTs. Prize max, first person to tell me what VKT stands for. Just for giving out some more prizes on a Friday.
Riding with vehicle kilometre travelled.
Correct. So it's a good way. I mean, you want to do per 100 million VKT, or per billion BKT or whatever you decide to use. It's a good metric to compare, different roads at different volumes for their risk characteristics. But you see, because you're comparing that like for like, as opposed to just doing number of crashes. You see it asymptotes out there around 4. You're not going to, you can just keep clearing the roadside and people are going to go beyond that or roll over, and you've just got this residual death and serious injury again. So clear zones have actually been phased out as a particular technique under the Australia's Guide to Road Design Part 6. And certainly not really the way we're thinking about roadside hazards in that old traditional clear zone way. A couple of reasons for that, but the big one being that people used to think that once I calculate a clear zone, and some of you are very familiar with calculating clear zones, you've got your vehicle volume, your speed, and is it on a curve or not, and it spits out a number, and maybe it's 9 meter clear zone. Well, people were like acting as though somehow, if you've got risk here and you've got 9 meters here, and that's what you've calculated as your clear zone, like risk was, there, and then just drops off as soon as you're after 9 meters. That's how people were, operating under this. And we would see then at 9 meters, new roads, power poles all running in a row at 9 meters, trees all planted at 9 meters. And, this thinking that 8.9, no risk, very high risk, 9.1, no risk. Now, of course, we all intuitively know that's not the case, but that was the way clear zones were playing out. So what we're now doing under Part 6 and the way we think about a roadside is to understand that risk goes down. It goes down actually pretty significantly over those first 4 to 5, and then it sort of just peters out like that. And it really doesn't ever get to 0 if you're just clearing area, or into much lower than that 4. And then I've got some little graphs there on different bits and pieces, but we know through these clear zones, it's not necessarily a safe place to be, because people go well beyond that, and there's sometimes rollover crashes occurring. So they're not the highest alignment with safe system principles. And they're often just extremely hard to achieve due to the fact that you can't cut down the trees, and we don't want to cut down the trees. So expensive to remove power poles and those sorts of things, the land availability, and the list goes on. But what we know is we're going to get really good, the first 4 to 5 meters of clear area is very, very good benefit. But what we know now is that barrier systems far superior. Well, I shouldn't say far superior, definitely superior to a cleared area. Now that can be a bit, people sort of scratch their head at that. Oh, really? So, if we had a 15 meters of cleared area, actually better to have a barrier system at 4 or 6 meters? The answer is yes. Amazingly, isn't it? That's quite amazing. You're going to get better safety outcomes on those roads, which are, your state highway style roads, putting a continuous barrier system and clearing that out. You will have more crashes, right? Actually, the likelihood will go up a bit, because a lot of if you cleared it out, maybe a big portion of the vehicles that left the road would go to that cleared area, they would recover, or they'd stop and they'd get back onto the road. There would be no incident. Right? But there's a portion of them that would either roll over or go beyond that and crash. But when you put the barrier in, most of those vehicles are going to hit the barrier and they're going to slide along the barrier, and then they're going to have some panel beating. So it's an interesting one where we're going to probably see more crashes, far less death and serious injury. So we don't really design roads like this. So, State Highway 1, you're going to be doing big duplications of parts of it, maybe between, I don't know, Christchurch and Timaru, where I drive a lot of the time when I'm allowed in New Zealand. If that was going to get duplicated, you wouldn't duplicate it like this anymore. Maybe get rid of these. But, if you got rid of these, this is what the old Off-Road Sky Part 6 would have told you to do. Big, wide, median, sealed shoulders, hazards all outside the clear zone. Forget about the big truck rumble strips. That's just a random thing. But that's what it used to tell us to do. And then you build these and you spend billions of dollars. And then people go across this median and hit oncoming vehicles. They run off the road, they hit the trees. They're killed. And it's just so frustrating to see. We get these big jobs open like this. And there's one in New South Wales about a year and a half ago, just sticks with me. In the first 3 months of opening their $1 billion duplication job like this, a vehicle left the road, went over and killed 4 people and themselves, a family of 4 and themselves, on the brand new multi-billion-dollar duplication job. And you're just like, how is that possible? Imagine if a train line was built and within the first 3 months that 5 people were killed in an incident, and that everybody goes, yeah, we're probably going to see that again in the next year. The whole thing would just be like, they would shut the line down until this was fixed. It's just unacceptable. With this one, it's like, they should have stayed on the lane, or they were slightly intoxicated, or whatever it was. Anyway, but we know now. I'm going to jump through vehicle mechanics. That's in your notes, just if you are interested in some of the background on how people have done the research and discovered that it's actually better to place that barrier than create a clear zone. But I did want to point you at the new Off-Road Sky to Road Design Part 6, which is a pretty cool document. But here we go, very high level sort of stuff, like a barrier, the bumper bowling of roads. That is our highest alignment with safe system principles, because we know people are going to leave their lane. And New Zealand's doing really good at this now in the major new road projects, and we're seeing this continued barrier system really coming out well. Little indication there, but these are nice sort of cross sections as well to have a look at. We do a lot of star rating, so OzRap star rating, IRAP star rating, KiwiRap star rating. And that's basically, how your fridge or your washing machine has an energy rating, where you can safety star rate roads the same. We use about 70 variables. We plug it into the system, and it spits out a star rating. So this one, where you're doing that big, wide median, and you've got clear roadsides, gets 4 stars. So it's still decent star rating, but 5 stars when you've got a narrower cross section and you've got the barriers. So amazing, isn't it, that we can get that 5 stars with less land take, less trees removed, less cost sometimes, better star rating. And so I put a few different cross sections in there just for your reference and what sort of star rating you'd expect out of these, and all at 100 kilometers per hour. Just for your interest. But we do need to think about the application of this continuous barrier system, and we've worked on a lot of these, Max and crew and I, and have made mistakes and put in continuous barrier systems at offsets, which we know in theory are a far better outcome, and that the risk of actual broken down vehicle being rear-ended on some of these medium to lower volume roads is very minuscule. But we probably underestimated the public's fury when you do this, and so now designing and adjusting and thinking a lot more about user experience when they break down or they need to change or the kids thrown up in the back, or or the like. And so you do need to be careful with the specifics of design. But I don't have time to go into it now, but I just want to flag that it's not as easy as just roll out the barrier. And this last one, before I hand to Max to take you through the assignment, is just another example of the thinking of energy management. So we've got a wonderful roundabout's been put in at this location, and it's going to do a great job for the majority of vehicles, slowing vehicles down, people waking up, looking around. But in this case, we had 4 male passengers, 2 in the morning, driving very high speeds. You know the scenario. We don't want it to happen. We're going to work hard to try to minimize the amount of this sort of activity happening out there, but it's continuing to happen. And they've come through this roundabout, 2 in the morning, but if there were other vehicles approaching, they'd be going slow speed, looking around. They probably would have seen them and stopped, and not, they've gone through. They've left the road. They've hit the power pole, but the power pole had one of these things on it. It's called a Raptor cushion, and certainly available in New Zealand, maybe even invented in New Zealand, now that I say that. Anyway, Raptor cushion is basically, sits around a utility pole. It's got sort of a honeycomb crushable center to a degree, but that's not its beauty of energy management. I mean, that's not its absolute. It rotates when struck, right? And it's got these nice little angles on it. So when vehicles hit it, what it does is it takes the energy of the vehicle and it just moves it away from the pole. So, kind of like in martial arts where they take the energy of a punch and they move it along. Not that I've ever done martial arts in my life. When I watched The Karate Kid. It rotates and moves the energy along. And I just love the engineering brilliance of this in energy management. So really, to me, fascinating. I have a particular problem with utility providers who don't like these being put around their assets, and we can't maintain it, or it might, all these other bits and pieces. But I think we need to work with them a bit more. Anyway, just a random example there. All right. Any questions I need to deal with, Max, before you tell people what they're going to do with this little assignment? Are they going to need to cancel their weekend plans to do this assignment?
No, we're not that cruel. We've made it a fairly reasonable assignment. Hopefully only spending 15 to 20 minutes on it. And I'll just hop right into what you can expect to see. That's the assignment there, but this is the actual Moodle. Hopefully everyone's familiar with this output and what this looks like. There is a quiz after today, so feel free to hop into that after today's session and get stuck in there. But you'll also see Stage System Module 2 assignment. So if we click on that one there, it will take you to a Word document. You can just click on that one there and it'll open up, and feel free to just save that on your local desktop. And I've already got it open here. At the start here, we just spell out the instructions, which I'll read through now, just so you can comprehend it and make sure you can ask any questions if you need any clarifications. But what we'll get you to do is we want you to select an intersection. It can be any intersection that you want. It can be a local street intersection. It can be at work. It can be one that you have a real problem with, maybe that you pass all the time. Your choice. You can pick whichever intersection you like. And we'll get you to fill out some information on the page overleaf. You're to inspect the intersection. That's not a site inspection. That's just via Google Street View. So perhaps best to do something local so you are familiar with it. And then we're basically asking you to reflect on some of those discussions that we've had about exposure, likelihood, and severity, and fill in the table that is provided below. So we'll get you to fill in your name and also a link to your intersection on Street View, just so we can have a quick look around when we're reviewing your work and grading it to make sure that it more or less aligns with how we would review that particular intersection. So let's have a look at the actual table we'll get you to fill in. You can see here we've got the columns exposure, likelihood, and severity, which is perhaps making a lot of sense why Ken continues to talk about the ELS, the exposure, likelihood, and severity. We're asking you to, within the intersection that you've identified, jot down some factors that increase or influence exposure, likelihood, and severity. So you'll have to pop in these dot points here, a minimum of 1, a maximum of 3. We don't need to see, every possible issue that you can imagine within that intersection. We're just after between 1 and 3 issues that you identified. And we're critiquing whether or not you are applying them correctly if they relate to exposure, likelihood, or severity. So you don't need to be too concerned if perhaps you're not picking up, the most relevant likelihood factor or the most significant severity factor. We're most concerned that you're putting those in the right category, okay? So we just want to make sure that what you're saying is exposure does relate to exposure. So that goes in the first row there. Our second row is we're asking you to get into your solution stage of thinking and propose one change, just the one this time, that could reduce the impact of exposure, likelihood, and severity. So we just need one change for that. And we just, once again, in a dot point form, what could be proposed to reduce the impact of exposure reduce the impact of exposure, likelihood, severity. Once you've completed all that, you can just save this to your desktop. You're welcome to keep it as a Word document, or you can PDF it, whatever's easy. And then if you come back into Moodle, just right down at the bottom, there's an Add Submission button. You can click on that. It'll ask you to add a file, and you can just attach the file like that. And we get a notification saying that you've submitted it. And that means we can pop in there and start reviewing, and we can provide you feedback on how you went. And we can also have a discussion if there was any particular concerns that you had. Ken.
Oh, you've done beautifully there, Max. Yeah, don't get it. No, it should only take 15 minutes or so at the most. Really don't give us 20 pages of analysis on the intersection. And the start of next session, we will have the opportunity for somebody to dive into their intersection on Street View, and they can talk us through that, and that should be good. Well, we'll give people a few minutes to finish that quiz off and get started even. Max, unless anybody's got any questions.
Sounds good to me. And just the due date for that one is Tuesday. So just the day before our next webinar catch up, just so we can have a conversation on the assignment.
Yeah, then I can provide some feedback overall if people are confused, if I see common confusion. And of course, if you're just going, I really don't know what I'm doing here, I'm confused or the like, you get in contact with Max or myself. We'll have a one-on-one chat with you or provide you a little bit of guidance. We're here to help. But otherwise, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next week. Log in a little early for a chance to win a prize. Thanks, Max.
Take care, guys. Bye.